Hello, hello. Let's see what we have here. See who's going to be available to chat for a second. I see Tom Larimer has liked this. Give me a shout out. Let me know if you're here. I'd like to know who I'm talking to. Who's the audience? And we'll see what we can see about this. It's about 5:23 on Thursday, July 5th. Who else? I see Denise. Thank you for the like, Denise. Denise in Wisconsin, how are you? I'm going to give this a second to see who all Facebook gives the alerts to. Ronaldo. I can't roll the R's like I should. My wife can roll R's much better than I can since she's of Panamanian descent. But Ronaldo Gamboa. How you doing, Ronaldo? So we'll give this a moment before I kind of really get started on this. And Jody Giddings. Hope I didn't butcher your name too bad there, Ronaldo. Reynaldo. Jody Giddings and a few other people giving shout outs to those who are showing love. Jody, Tom Larimer, Grace, Paula Henderson, thank you all for listening in. We'll give it a few more moments here. So I'll just get going with this. So here's the thing that's interesting is I saw something, and I like to talk about different things that I see that come across my news feed. And I saw something and it talked about how it said that it showed a map, right? And it said that, hey, you have North America and South America. And so what it was trying to say, hey, Michelle, well, thank you for listening in while you're exercising. So what this meme said on Instagram, and I'll post it. As a matter of fact, let's see, I don't know. Yeah, Facebook won't let me share it in here. Otherwise, I would. But let's see. Will it let me? No, it won't let me share it. I'll share it afterwards. But basically, it was saying that you have North America and South America, and it tried to make the point that they're all America. So that it says America is a whole continent, not a country. And that would make Mexicans and Canadians North Americans. Well, technically, they're correct. Yes, from a geographic standpoint, North America is a continent. It's inarguable. South America is a continent. And so, yes, the point is that from a continent standpoint, all these people reside on the North American or South American continent. But it's absolutely absurd, and it's really just disingenuous to try to say that they're all Americans. Now, I'm going to go to the U.S. Department of State. Danny Strackner. Hope I didn't butcher your name, Danny. Thanks for listening in. I'm going to go to the U.S. Department of State. And it lists the way this Department of State breaks it down is they have their Western Hemisphere affairs, right? And countries and other areas. So it says information about countries, including dependencies and areas of special sovereignty, is available through the links, blah, blah, blah. This list is sorted alphabetically by short form names, but the way the U.S. Department of State breaks things down in terms of the way the United States deals with foreign nations is it has hemispherical breaks things down by hemisphere. So you got the Northern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere, you have the Americas, you have, Latin America, South America, right? All that, right? You have Africa. But here's the thing, here's the point. Christine, how are you, my friend? Is that there's only one America, and citizens of the United States of America are the only Americans. No one, no other nation, no citizens of any other nation refers to themselves as Americans. None. And it's just totally disingenuous, and it's pure leftist bunk to try to posit it any other way. I'm going to go down. Here's a list of the nations in the Western Hemisphere that are part of America, right? As they would try to say, because they're in the North American or South American or even Central American continents. Or, of course, Central America is North America, right? But so here's a list of the countries alphabetically: Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Aruba, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Curacao, Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Martin, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Did you hear the name America in the name of any of those nations? I mean, I just read off, I don't know what the number is, but it looks like a good 25 or so plus countries. Not a single one of the countries listed that are part of the Western Hemisphere have the name America in them. So it's such a load of crap. It's so disingenuous on the part of any leftist, regressive, socialist-minded person to try to make the idea say, oh, we're all America. No, they're not. They don't call themselves Americans, right? I mean, yes, they're the Latin American nations, but none of them think of themselves as being Americans. And it's funny because what you have right now is you have this move by leftists coming up from Central America, right? Latin America, if you will, who are sitting there trying to say that, well, we're just taking back the land that was stolen. Man, shut up. Shut up. Just stop. You're lying to yourself. First, you're not lying to me, because I know you're full of crap. You're lying to yourself. And the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself, because that keeps you stuck on stupid. You're not trying to take back the land that was stolen. See, here's the thing. What's happened throughout history is that humans' history has been one of conquest. It's only really been in the last, I'll say, 50 years, because the colonization has been the norm. Conquering and colonization has been the norm throughout human history, and it has really only been in the last 50 or so years, right? Because a lot of the African, a lot of the South American nations began to get their independence from European countries that colonized them. And it's not just European nations that were doing it. Look in Asia. Right? I mean, people, this is another thing that's just sad, is how disingenuous the left is. Because conquering has been the way of human beings throughout recorded history. It has been, one nation conquering another, right? One group of people. And when you say nation, nations were not even, nations were a group of people. It wasn't even necessarily distinguished by a particular geography. There wasn't, there were boundaries that was typically like our nation, our group of people inhabit and control this land from this mountain range to that river, or from, that river up north to the ocean south. That's the way things have always been, right? And it's really only been recently, literally in the past 50 or so years, when the drive to stop conquering other nations really took place. So when you look at when the United States of America was founded, obviously in 1776, we just celebrated was that 200 and, I got to do math here. What is that, 234? something like that. Anyway, yeah, 234, I believe, is the number. Our anniversary of the United States of America as a nation. You have to realize in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, nations were still taking over other nations. They were still invading and owning other nations and controlling groups of people. And anybody who's of a Latin American descent, Latino, Hispanic, whatever you want to call it, for you to sit there and try to say, well, yeah, we're just trying to take the land back. Shut up. Either you're a liar or you're stupid. I don't know which one's worse, rather. Because if you are a descendant of the Incas, the Mayans, the whatever, any of those Latin, Central American, whatever like that people, are you really going to sit there and act as if your people were not conquerors? It's such a load of crap that people try to point out this idea. It's like the whole idea, it's the Howard Zinn school of education or miseducation, or more accurately, indoctrination, that leads people to believe that nations or boundaries were formed any other way other than conquering. So when people want to sit there and talk about Europeans and all the Europeans were such terrible, listen, here's the reality. The Europeans did it better than anybody else. That's it, point blank, period. They kicked your butt. They kicked our butt. Obviously, you can look at me and tell that I am of African descent. Somewhere at some point in my family's history, somebody was born in Africa and they were brought to the United States, or actually more accurately, they were brought, well, I think probably it was the United States at that point, but they were brought to the Western Hemisphere, right? And it wasn't a cruise ship. They weren't like on a cruise and they took an excursion and decided they liked it here so much that they wanted to hang out here. Yes, obviously, I am the descendant of slaves sold by their fellow Africans, typically through a slave trade that involved Arab Muslims, and sold to Europeans. So that's one of the things, like, look, Africans, listen, I don't want to hear anything from y'all. I really don't. Because Africans sold other Africans. The idea, all right, let's think about this for example, so for a second. Today, in 2018, how many people, how many white folks are vacationing in Africa? How many people are saying, man, I think I just want to go hang out in Africa? White folks, when they go to Africa, they go to South Africa. Why? Because South Africa has a more temperate climate that's more conducive and friendly to white folks. White folks ain't hanging out in sub-Saharan Africa. The climate is not conducive. It's not temperate. It's not a friendly climate. That's why it was called the Dark Continent for so long, because it was not a place that white people in general could go and just kind of hang out. You know, I mean, they still can't go there without getting shots. Shots, I mean, like, you know, shots, inoculation, and so on and so forth, right? So the idea that in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and so on and so forth, that a handful, like, think about the sailing ships of old. They weren't really all that big. They were about 100, maybe 150 feet at most. They weren't they weren't like the ships that we have today, right? So it's not like they were just carrying out truckloads, thousands of people on one ship. There were thousands and thousands of ships that were coming, carrying out 100 or so at a time. But here's the thing. Do you really think that, like, let's say there are maybe a dozen, maybe 24 sailors on each one of those ships for them to come and carry their cargo of African slaves? So are you trying to tell me that a dozen or 24 Europeans, bunch of white boys, went into the deepest, darkest parts of Africa and just were like going into the bush, a couple of miles into the bush with nets and just throwing nets all over black folks? And then you're trying to tell me that a couple of white boys in a rowboat with nets somehow managed to drag out somewhere, the estimates are up to 17 million Africans were taken out of Africa and brought to the Western Hemisphere. So what you want me to believe, with your whole idea, the way the left is promoting this, what you want me to believe is that 17 million Africans were brought out with nets thrown on them, kicking and screaming, dragged from the bush to the shore, to the coastline, and put on boats and brought to the Western Hemisphere. And that was done by a couple dozen white boys. That's stupid. You sound stupid even. I feel stupid saying it. You sound stupid for believing it. It's stupid. It's a stupid idea if you stop and think. So this whole idea of, like, oh, the Europeans, they were so bad. No, Europeans were doing what everyone else throughout recorded history was doing. This was not new. Conquering other nations was not new. Once again, if you're young and dumb, if you've been indoctrinated, you're of the belief that somehow this was just something new, that only Europeans did it. And that's because you're not even reading textbooks. You're only listening to a handful of leftist, regressive, socialist-minded, weapons-grade morons who are doing the indoctrination. If you actually go and study, you realize there's no truth to that. So this whole idea of, like, we should, like this whole idea on the southern border, like, well, they're going to try to take back the land that was taken from them. Good luck with that. We don't do things like that around the world now. People are not taking land by force anymore. We as human beings have generally progressed beyond that, right? We realize that we start recognizing things like sovereignty. So nations have been formed, borders have been established. We do things through diplomacy. We don't do things through conquering. And we haven't for a while now. So this ridiculous idea that, that the people in South America, the people in Latin America are Americans, it's asinine. They're not Americans. I'm going to, once again, for those who joined late, I read this earlier. I'm going to read it back again. The U.S. Department of State and their Western Hemisphere affairs has a list of the nations in the Western Hemisphere that are in the North American and South American continents, keeping in mind, of course, that Latin America, the Caribbean, right, Western Hemisphere, they're not Americans, even though they're on continents that have the name America. So once again, I'm going to read it back to you, and I want you to, would you listen, ask yourself, of all the nations that are listed, I'm going to read it because they're alphabetical, how many of them have the name America in them? So once again, we have Antigua and Barbuda. And I didn't know there was a Barbuda. I know there was a Barbados. But anyway, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Aruba, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, right? Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Curacao, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Martin, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, United States of America, Uruguay, and Venezuela. How many times did I say America during that list? I think America, the word America was only listed once, because there is only one nation in the world that is American, right? I mean, and it's kind of ridiculous when you sit there and think about it. Like when we say Asia, right? I mean, it's arguable that the Asian continent stretches all the way, actually, technically, to Istanbul. Technically, Turkey, because Turkey is partly in Europe and partly in Asia, technically Turkey is an Asian nation, but nobody thinks of Turkey as Asia. Nobody thinks of the Middle East as Asia. Technically, Palestine, as some people want to call it, right? But really Israel, and then you have the Palestinians, if you will, who are really Jordanians. But, are Jordanians Asians? I mean, technically, they're on the Asian continent. Do you really think of Jordanians as being Asian? It's one of those things that if people are being honest, it's just a lie to sit there and try to lump them all together as if they're the same. They're on the same continent. That's it. That's the end of the discussion. They're not Asian nations. And people in South America and Latin America, they're not American. Mexicans are not Americans. They're Mexicans. That's it. Canadians are not Americans. They're Canadians. And the funny thing is, if you ask any of those people and they're being blunt and honest, none of them, except those very small percentage of people who have been thoroughly indoctrinated with leftists and leftism and they're trying to push an agenda, none of them will say, oh yeah, I'm an American. They don't think of themselves as Americans, and I don't think of them as Americans. And I tell people, listen, I am the executive director of Unhyphenated America. What is Unhyphenated America? We're an organization that believes that America is best when it's unhyphenated, which means if you understand, if you believe in, if you embrace the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then you're an American. And there's no need for any prefix or suffix. You're just an American. And you have to ask yourself, how many people in the world really believe in those principles, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness? I will tell you there are plenty of people who are currently within the borders. There's 325 million, give or take, people currently within the borders of the United States of America. And yes, technically, they're Americans. There are people who were born in America, and technically they are Americans. But do they really understand? Do they understand this? Do they believe in, do they embrace life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? No, they don't. So this ridiculous idea of saying that all these people who are in the Western Hemisphere, who are part of the continents of North America and South America, and referring to them as Americans is as ridiculous as the idea of like saying that a human being who has a penis and testicles is a female if they feel like it. Yeah, that's how stupid it is. It's just that stupid. You are a male. Now, man, that's a whole nother thing, right? Manhood is something that has to be earned. You're a male, you'll forever be a male because of your genes. But if you cut off your Frankenbeans, bruh, even if you walk around and you tuck your Frankenbeans, you're still a male. You're just a male who mutilated yourself. Wow. Like, I had to laugh about that anyway, because I'm just like, any male in his right mind doesn't want anyone with a sharp instrument coming near his Frankenbeans. So I can't regard you as being someone who's in your right mind if you are a male who refers to yourself as anything other than a male. And you're not in your right mind. Listen, if you are an American, if you think that you're the same as somebody who's from Suriname, Peru, Antigua, Mexico, you're not the same. You're very fortunate to be here. And quite frankly, that's one of the things about the celebration of the 4th is you should be happy. You should be celebrating the fact that we have an independence, or we have the ability to have an independence that is unique. It's rare in this world. And try to muddy that up by saying, oh, well, it's all the same. Mexico, Suriname, Peru, whatever. No, it's not the same. Stop trying to muddy things. I hate that with a red hot passion. I hate it. I hate when people try to muddy that up and act as if it's all the same. It's not the same. America is a very unique place. Nowhere else in the world has ever existed like America, because nowhere else in the world have those principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness existed. America came into being with the confluence of three things. It's like a city that meets, actually, I think what Pittsburgh is a perfect example, because I think there's like several rivers that meet that, right there where the city of Pittsburgh is, but it's the confluence. America is a confluence of coming together of three things: Judeo-Christian morality, Greco-Roman philosophy, and Anglo-Saxon law. That's what created America. That's it. We're the only nation that has those three things as our foundational principles. Or as Dennis Prager would talk about it, the American Trinity, right? When I say America, I'm only talking about the United States of America. And that's what E pluribus unum, in God we trust, and liberty. That's what Dennis Prager talks about, and he's 100% correct. The more studying you do, the more you realize. The American Trinity is liberty, right? E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. And in God we trust. That's what makes America. No other nation in the Western Hemisphere, let alone the world, has those three things: liberty, e pluribus unum, and in God we trust as their trinity. No other nation came about as a result of the confluence of three philosophies, or three ideas: Greco-Roman philosophy, Anglo-Saxon law, and Judeo-Christian morality. Judeo-Christian morality is real simple. It is the belief that there is a God who's the creator of the universe and everything in it, and that we know his word is through the Holy Bible, and that he had only one begotten son, who was Jesus Christ, born of a virgin, who had no sin nature at all, and that he is our Lord and Savior. He went to the cross, was crucified, died on the cross, was buried, and risen. That's Judeo-Christian morality, or specifically Christianity in that case, believing in Christ. That's the difference between Judaism and Christianity, is that we as Christians believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah, the only begotten Son of God. But we also believe in the Holy Bible, we believe in the Old Testament, so that's why it's the Judeo-Christian morality. Greco-Roman philosophy is reason. It's the use of reason, logic, and reason. And Anglo-Saxon law can be summarized to one thing: it was the first time in recorded human history that it was positioned that the king, the monarch, was subject to the law. And that's why when you read our foundational documents, and it talks about the laws of nature and nature's God. See, because every other nation, every other group of people in history has looked at things from the standpoint of basically the divine right of kings. That has been the philosophy of human beings throughout history, is that there was a divine right of kings. Essentially, a king could do whatever the heck a king wanted to do. I watched the movie Shaka Zulu, which is a really good miniseries to watch. If you have Netflix, I suggest you watch it. But with Shaka Zulu, he met the Europeans. Excuse me one second. I'm not Marco Rubio, so it doesn't matter if I drink. So with Shaka Zulu, when he ran across the Europeans, and they were British, they're British, and they were basically talking about how they had a certain amount of sovereignty as human beings. And Shaka Zulu, who was African, right, the Zulu tribe, he basically had the same attitude that the rest of the world has, was that he as king was divine, that what he said went, that there were no other rules, no other laws, and he was not beholden to anyone except himself and what he thought was right. And he was a savage. He was a smart man, don't get me wrong, but he was a savage. He thought nothing about killing another human being, because to him, like every other king throughout history, human beings did not have sovereignty. Human beings did not have unalienable rights. So it doesn't matter whether it was Shaka Zulu or whether it was, you name the emperor or king or whatever like that in Asia, whether it was the tribal chief in South America, whatever. This idea of human sovereignty, individual sovereignty, unalienable rights, is a uniquely Western idea. And we were the first to codify that. That's what makes America special. So when you start studying that, And I see what Christine said. Yes, Anglo-Saxon Enlightenment values is also part of the confluence. You're correct. But that's once again, that's a more in-depth conversation. But just to kind of circle back and land this puppy, right? Because I actually have to go. I'm going to meet up with some friends at the Trump Hotel. Once again, if you are a conservative in the Metro DC area, the Trump Hotel is the place to go. I mean, it's like, that's where conservatives meet. So I got a buddy who's Ralph Chittum's is celebrating his birthday, so I'm gonna be meeting up with him and a few other people. So I have to get going here in a second. But yeah, anyway, that's what makes America unique. It's those things. It's the confluence of those things: Judeo-Christian morality, Greco-Roman philosophy, Anglo-Saxon law. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Ann Giles, how you doing, Ann? And anyone else I did not specifically say hi to, how you doing? Paul, let's see, neither is a Republic. Yeah, let's see, take this. Nancy, how you guys doing? So yeah, just wanted to touch on that and just say, look, once again, the United States, and I encourage anyone who came on late to go back and listen, because I kind of touched on some things about the nations that are in the Western Hemisphere, but that's what's different about America. And that's why there's only one America. Yes, there are continents that are named American continents. North America, South America, obviously, right? It's just, that's grade school geography. We know there are the 7 continents, right? And only in those 2 of the continents have America in the name. But the world is made up of nations. And there's only one nation that has America in its name. That's it, right? And what makes a nation? What makes a nation? Its language, its culture, and its borders. That's what makes a nation. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Language, borders, culture. And the key part of American culture, once again, is the philosophy. It's the confluence of Greco-Roman philosophy, Anglo-Saxon law, and Judeo-Christian morality. And as Dennis Prager laid out, what makes America our American Trinity, I'm not going to call it a Holy Trinity because that's sacrilegious, but the American Trinity is: in God we trust, e pluribus unum, out of many one, that's what that means, and liberty. And liberty is such a key thing. That's a whole conversation for another time. I think I want to talk about that at another time, of what is liberty. But yeah, that's what makes America unique, that we believe in liberty and that we are a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. And none of our foundational documents is the word democracy listed in terms, or used in terms of, to refer to our nation or any of our 50 states. In fact, our Constitution says that any state joining the Union has to guarantee its citizens, its residents, a republican form of government. We are a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. Lots of nations have Democrat in their name, and they all suck. So, let me know when you find another constitutional republic that's like the United States of America. And one last time, there's a reason why Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, she's got to go. Because just that one statement alone that she made when, I think it's 2012, she said that if she were to have a hand in helping to form another nation and write a constitution, she would not use the United States Constitution as a basis. Why is she on the Supreme Court? I mean, it's like, listen, to me, if you're married and your spouse says, if I had to do all over again, I wouldn't be married to you. If my spouse said that to me, let's go. Let's cut this short now. Let's go ahead and sign the papers. But let's get a divorce, because there's no reason for us to be married. If your spouse believes that if they had to do all over again, they wouldn't marry you, why are you with them? And if a U.S. Supreme Court justice says that if they had to do all over again, if they had anything to do with the formation of a country and founding of a constitution, they wouldn't use our constitution, they should not be a Supreme Court justice of these United States of America, the United States of America. But that's a whole nother discussion. She shouldn't be there. And when President Trump, and I think that I don't know if I didn't catch the news. I haven't watched news all day today or looked really at any news, but I don't know if he announced his pick. But yes, whoever the next Supreme Court justice is going to be, I hope that they have this same philosophy that there is only one America and that we're a constitutional republic, unique in the history of the world, that we came from the formation of Greco-Roman philosophy, Anglo-Saxon law, and Judeo-Christian morality, that they understand that the American Trinity is liberty, e pluribus unum, and in God we trust. If they don't believe those things, they really have no business being a Supreme Court justice. Quite frankly, if they don't believe those things, they should not be an elected official anywhere in our constitutional republic. And I don't listen to people. I mean, seriously, when you start positioning stuff, when you say, and I'm going to post the link, when somebody says that silly crap about, oh, they're all America, you lose the right for me to value your opinion on much of anything. So listen, I got to run. Thanks for listening in, folks. Leave comments in the comment field. Take care. God bless.